Today, April 28th, we're here with Mr. Frank Towers, Sr., who is a veteran of the 30th Division, served in World War II, enlisted in the service 1940. Mr. Towers, can you tell us your date of birth?
I was born on 13 June 1917. I'm close to 96 years old.
Mr. Towers, what city and town did you come from?
Well, I was born in Boston, but raised in Vermont. Went to St. Johnsbury Academy, University of Vermont, and then got into service in 1940. And after 3 years of training, I joined with the 30th Infantry Division, and we went overseas in February of 1944. Training in England for about 5 months, and were involved in the D-Day landing in Normandy on Omaha Beach. And I can remember that very well because that was my 26th birthday, 13th of June, the day that I landed. Now, we had been subjected to a certain amount of propaganda about a certain number of Jewish concentration camps, and reading about the torture and slave labor that these Jews were subjected to during the Nazi regime. As we went through France, we saw none of that. We went through northern France, Belgium, Holland, the Battle of the Ardennes, back into Germany, and we saw none of this propaganda. We continued on through into Germany, fighting around the northern flank of the Ruhr industrial area. And in March, the 24th of March, we crossed the Rhine River. Now we're talking about the 24th of March. The end of the war came the 8th of May. So there's a very small window in here now. And we have seen none of this propaganda that they've been feeding to us. And we continued on not knowing about it at all. We captured the city of Brunswick on the 10th of April and were headed for Magdeburg, which was going to be the last city that we would fight for and liberate. On the 13th of April, between Brunswick and Magdeburg, we came to a small town of Farsleben, a very small town, which we captured very quickly. But there we were surprised in finding a long train of about 40 cars loaded with Jews that had come from Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. This was the first time that we had been subjected to any of the Nazi horror torture program. These 2,500 Jews had been on this train for 6 days with once-a-day stopovers to receive a ration of water, a ration of a cup of soup, which consisted of a pot of water with some potato peelings in it. They were tired, emaciated, dirty, stinking. We never saw such horrible looking, almost semi-skeletons. As we opened the boxcars of these freight trains, bodies literally just fell out like sardines being dumped out of a can. Some of them could not stand up. A few actually had died en route, and of course were taken care of and buried immediately. But we had to get our medical battalion in to help medicate these people. We being American, good-hearted and loaded down with food as well as our own ammunition and necessities, we gave them everything that we had. Cigarettes, apples, candy, chewing gum, you name it, we had it. And we gave it to them. And they gobbled it down as fast as they could. It was the first time that they had seen gum, chocolate bars, such things like that. And their bodies were just not acclimated to that type of food, and they immediately threw it up. We actually made them sicker than they were before we gave them the food. So we had to stop giving them our rations, and the medics rationed the food out to them, giving them very small quantities more frequently during the day. So it became my job at that point to round up transportation and get those people out of there, because Farsleben at that time was in between the Germans and the Americans. It was a battle zone, and artillery was falling around us from both sides. So it was necessary to get those people out of there before any of them wounded from the war activities. So I moved them back to the town of Hillersleben, which had been liberated the day before. Now, Hillersleben had been a German research center and air base where there was a lot of concrete block buildings, nice homes where the officers had lived, and most of all, a hospital. So this was an ideal place to bring these people and get them situated. They were stripped of their clothing, which were lice infected, and could not. They were so dirty and nasty that we felt that the clothing could not be laundered readily. So it was just piled up and put into a bonfire. The victims then were run through nice showers, given soap and towels, and then they were dusted with DDT. Now, of course, we know today DDT is a carcinogenous material, but at that point in time, it was the best known lice deterrent or killer, and it did the job. So as soon as the people got showered and DDT'd, they were given new clothing, which had been rounded up from the German population in Hillersleben. Then they were assigned to quarters in the barracks or in the private homes, depending on what their status was, and those who were ill were assigned to the hospital. So at that point, my job was done, and I turned them over to the American military government, the American Red Cross, and left them in good hands. And I went about my job, and in effect, I bid them goodbye, good luck, and I went back to my job as a liaison officer. Now, fast forwarding 50, 60 years, I began to wonder whatever happened to those people. And I was able to get from Bergen-Belsen a manifest list of the names of the people who were on that train. Now, the Germans were very meticulous about keeping records, and this was one of the records that existed, and I was able to obtain. The list of people listed their name, their birth date, and their birthplace. So from that, I could determine who the children were of 21 years of age or less, and those who were older. In going through the list, I found that there were about 700 children on that train, age 21 down to 0. I started some research to see what had happened to those people. And of course, immediately I assumed that half of them were deceased because of age and disease and illness contributed to their malnutrition in the years of the Holocaust. So this brought our total down to the possibility that there's 350 people out there, children, who are still living today. I went on the internet, and to date, I have found 250 of those people. Now I'm here at Washington, D.C., at the National Holocaust Museum, where we're having a 20th annual tribute to these survivors and veterans like myself. And I'm in hopes of meeting with 4 of these children survivors tonight at this dinner. 2 of them I have met, 3 of them I have met previously. 1 of them I have never met before. He's a newcomer that I just found in the past week. So as time goes on, I continue to find some of these children or child victims of the Holocaust that were on that train. So here we are today, paying tribute to them.
Frank, I'd like to ask you a question. You kept using certain words, but before we get to that, you landed in Normandy, France, on Omaha Beach, correct?
Correct.
Was that on D-Day, actually?
No,
I
I landed on my birthday, the 13th of June, which was 7 days after D-Day.
So that's D-Day 7.
The initial invasion was done by the 1st and the 29th Infantry Divisions, and we followed directly behind the 29th Infantry Division.
And you worked your way through France, and then...
Northern France, Belgium, Holland, and then into Germany.
Okay. You also mentioned the word propaganda that you were being fed, and you referred to the term as propaganda. That was propaganda by our government, the United States government?
It was published generally in the newspapers in the early 40s. And then it was picked up by the Army newspaper, the Stars and Stripes. So periodically we would see articles in there about some Jew had escaped from Auschwitz or Dachau or Buchenwald, and he was telling this wild story about thousands of Jews being tortured. We just couldn't believe that this one Jew is telling about 10,000 or more Jews being tortured. There should be some evidence, some documentation. Why didn't another prisoner escape and tell the story? This is just one weird story from one person. Nobody would believe him. One of these men went back to his hometown in Austria and told a story in the synagogue about the torture of the Jews in Auschwitz. They laughed him out of the synagogue. He died a poor, broken man. Nobody ever believing him. But when Auschwitz was liberated, then they believed. Likewise, we never believed that the German people, as educated as they were, civilized human beings, could do this to another segment of human beings. This is just not possible. But when we saw the train, we believed.
And on that train there were alive and dead people?
There were six people actually dead when we found the train. There had been others die on the train en route from Bergen-Belsen, but each night when the train would stop, they would bury the dead people by the side of the track and move on to the next stop.
Did you believe that the situation with the propaganda that soldiers were being fed at that time, when you heard the story about the Normandy massacre?
Yes, I was there.
Okay, and you yourself were there at the time.
Yes.
And did you actually see them bringing the boys out of the frozen ground?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I have photographs of the bodies covered with snow. You can see the humps in the snow where the bodies are lying. The photographs that I have were taken before the bodies were exhumed.
And you're also familiar with the Wreath 11?
The what?
The Wreath 11. Those were 11 black soldiers that were shot.
No, I'm not familiar with that.
That happened right around the same time.
Yeah.
I just asked that because the soldiers felt that it was all propaganda, and I can understand what you're saying. One guy comes out, says he saw all this, and until you actually saw it, smelled it, you could taste it in the air, you knew what was really happening.
I think that I felt that the Stars and Stripes was putting this out as propaganda to increase our tenacity and desire to go after the Germans and get them for doing this nasty deed. But it really didn't inspire us all that much, because we just thought it was propaganda.
You said that when you landed, you were 26 years old.
Correct.
In Normandy.
Yes.
You had to be the old man.
I was the old man in my company.
That's at 26 years.
My men were all 18, 19-year-old kids.
Right. And what rank were you?
I was a first lieutenant then.
You were a first lieutenant then. And when
Right.
the war ended,
I was still a first lieutenant.
you were still a first lieutenant at the time of the war.
In my job, that called for first lieutenant's
Right.
position.
There was a time as you crossed into Germany, before you got to the camp and after the camp, you came across, I'm sure, SS soldiers?
We constantly were coming across SS soldiers from early on in France, far and few between, because they always stayed in the back ranks and pushing the Wehrmacht and the lower ranking soldiers up to the front. So we didn't capture a great number of SS soldiers until virtually the end of the war.
Well, I want to thank you on behalf of the survivors of the Holocaust. I want to thank you on behalf of all people who believe in humanity, such as yourself. And I hope tonight and tomorrow you'll be reunited with these survivors, because with the deed that you had done and your comrades that were there saved lives of many people who may not have survived those last few days had you not arrived when you did. And I look forward to videotaping you possibly tonight, if you do meet some of the people, and tomorrow. I want to thank you. And one other question, do you recall your serial number?
0129-4936. Something you never forget.
You remember where you did your basic?
I did my basic at Camp Blanding, Florida.
Thank you very, very much for the interview.
Let's hope this never happens again.
Thank you. Amen.
Okay.
Okay.